So what's up people, and welcome to another Warframe video. So with the recent release of the new quest Chains of Harrow came an introduction of a new Warframe, appropriately named Harrow. And Harrow is often described as the priest frame, although I tend to call it the penance frame. And the reason I call him a penance frame is after using him for a little bit of time, I realized that to reap the rewards from many of his abilities, you have to do a little bit of self-sacrifice. And because of that, this frame is not as intuitive as many of the other frames that have recently come out, and also it does take a little bit of practice to understand how to use this frame. Now I myself have used the frame for a few weeks and I still haven't really figured out what's the most optimal way, but I do know that it does reward people with good battle skills, such as people who can do headshots really easily. I myself cannot, and so this video is from a perspective of someone who's a mediocre player such as myself, and how Harrow looks from somebody of my caliber. Now if you look at his stats aren't bad at all. And he has actually decent armor stats as well as shield stats, and especially his armor stats is pretty good for giving him a little bit of longevity out in the field. He also has some okay energy stats as well as health stats, so there's nothing that makes him significantly squishy. Although I wouldn't call him a tanky frame, at least I would call him a semi-durable frame. Now, as far as his abilities are concerned, Harrow is one of the few frames which doesn't have any single attack ability. All his abilities are focused either on utility sort of capabilities or buff sort of capabilities. And because of that, some people may have a concern with him. Many people do like to use their abilities to attack and hit a lot of enemies and take them down. And Harrow is not exactly that sort of frame. And you do have to figure out how to best utilize his abilities, unlike some of the other frames where it's relatively obvious and you could go out into the battlefield and spam that ability like crazy. This frame takes a little bit of kind of investigation and trying out to figure out what's the best way to utilize him. This is especially true for higher level missions because not only doesn't he have any attack abilities, his abilities are also not defense related either, so you can't really sit back and rely on his defense or his strong offense capability to take out the enemy, especially the higher level ones, and that requires a little bit more thinking during the battle as well as being a little bit more alert and careful when using this frame. So now looking at his four abilities, his first ability, Condemn, is a semi-defense related ability, and it's actually quite a good utility ability. It can hold down enemies quite well. It sends a bunch of chains out and holds down the enemy for a short period of time so that you can attack them without worrying about getting any retaliation from them. Now what's nice is that it has a secondary capability, which is to be able to overshield your frame, but it does come with a requirement, which is you have to work for it. You can only get an overshield based upon the number of enemies that you could kill who are chained down using Condemn. And so if you don't have any enemies to kill, or if you fail to kill any of the enemies that you chain down, then you won't get any overshield capabilities from this effect. Now the chains are quite useful. Aside from regular enemies, it does hold bosses such as the Jackal. I found that it actually works against the Juggernaut. I even found that it actually holds down the Stalker for a short period of time. Now one enemy that I did find that it doesn't work at all on is Lephantis. So you do have to try it out on specific enemies to see if they work. But overall, it's actually a pretty good ability. It can lock down a lot of enemies and help you get overshield. And so yeah, it's a ability that may help you get out of trouble while in a mission. Now Harrow's second ability, titled Penance, is a very interesting ability. It's one of those abilities appropriately named from the title where you actually do have to give a sacrifice. And what is the sacrifice? Is basically you lose all your shields the moment you cast this ability. So this is one of those abilities that you hope that you have a sentinel or a companion that can restore your shields relatively quickly after you cast this ability. And even though your sentinel or your companion may be able to restore your shields, if you had overshields, it won't restore it back to your overshield capability. So there is a relatively high cost associated with this ability. So what do you get back for this actual sacrifice? So the first capability that you get is the ability to have a higher fire rate and a reload rate for your weapon that you're equipping. Now the actual amount of increase you get, I've heard, is up to about 70%, which may be hard to visualize. So here I have Harrow try it out with a Soma Prime. Initially without the penance and then with the penance. As you can see, you actually do get a significant bonus coming out with regards to how fast you can shoot and also how fast you can reload. Now in the case of a non-automatic weapon such as the Euphona, it's a little bit less obvious how fast you can shoot or the advantage you get. However, it does seem like it actually does make it a little bit quicker. The reload's definitely faster. As you also notice, once I cast Penance, my shields went to 0 and it had to charge up again. So yeah, there is a sacrifice associated with it, but if you have a weapon that is severely overpowering weapon, the advantage you could get from using that weapon at a faster rate could be significant. Now on top of the faster reload rate and fire rate, Penance gives you another capability, which is the ability to regain health. And just like with the overshield in Condemn, you do have to work at it in the sense that you do have to kill enemies, but 5% of all of the damage that you deal out to the enemies will be used to restore your health. So although this isn't an attack or defense type capability, it is a utility that helps take advantage of both attack and defense type skills in the sense that it will improve the capabilities of your weapons and at the same time help you become more survivable in a mission. So here I have Harrow almost down to nothing in terms of health, and he does cast 4, which I'll talk about later. But after casting Penance, then with one shot he restores to max health. So it does turn out to be a very useful capability, but it all depends upon how much damage you can inflict while Penance is on. And finally, the nice thing about Penance, similar to Trinity's Bless, is that it affects all the other players as well. So they get the weapons buff as well as the health restore. Now, I should say that in both cases, it all depends upon your capabilities. So your other teammates' kills won't and damages won't add up to the health, and only yours will. So if they keep on stealing all your kills, then of course nobody gets any benefit or health benefits at least from Penance. And so it is an ability that not only requires skill, but also good teamwork if you want to get the maximum benefit from it. So moving on, Harrow's third ability, Thurible, is another ability that requires self-sacrifice in order to gain the benefits. And this is a very interesting one. It's an energy gaining ability. However, to be able to gain the energy, first you have to lose the energy, and the amount of energy you lose through the channeling into this ability will determine how much you can gain afterwards. And just like Condemn and Penance, the amount of energy you can receive all depends upon the number of enemies that you can kill. So when you cast Thurible, you first start channeling energy into the ability. And in this case, since I only had a small amount of energy, I could only put in like 3 seconds worth of channeling. And after that, the amount of kills, for every kill that you basically get the same amount of energy as the amount of seconds that you put into the channeling. So for every kill that I get, I basically get somewhere around a little bit more than 3 units of energy. Now in this case, this is one of those abilities that rewards battle capability, and headshots actually gets 4 times the amount of energy you bring back. However, as you can see, it took about 70 sort of energy points to get about a little bit more than 3 seconds worth of channeling, which means that you get about 3 to 4 units of energy back. So you do have to kill a significant number of enemies, about 15 to 20 enemies, to break even, or to do about 1/4 of that in consistent repeated headshots, one right after another, to be able to break even in terms of energy. If you don't do that, then you actually lose energy casting this ability. So it is a little bit of a gamble, but if you know that you're going to get a significant number of enemies coming at you and you're going to get a lot of kills, then this is definitely a very useful ability to be able to gain energy. And similar to penance, the energy gained is not only gained to you, but to everybody in your team. But once again, similar to penance, it only depends upon your kills. So if your teammates take all the kills from you, then they won't benefit from the energy increase. And this finally brings us to Covenant. And Covenant, in my opinion, is one of the most unique capabilities for Harrow, which makes this frame a very useful frame. No, seriously, I may have some reservations and really have to think twice with regards to using this frame due to the earlier abilities, but the 4th ability, Covenant, more than makes up and makes me want to use this frame for a lot of missions. So the most obvious capability that you get from Covenant is your invulnerability. And for a short period of time, you're completely invulnerable, not only to damage, but also to any status effects that you would get hit at. And this is not only for yourself, but also for everybody else in your team. So this is one of those capabilities that can get you out of significant amount of trouble just by giving you complete invulnerability for a short period of time. And in that sense, it's kind of like Nyx with Assimilate or with Valkyrie and her Hysteria. However, possibly even more amazing than that is the secondary capability that comes with this ability, which is the ability to gain critical chance on your weapons. And so in the time that you're absorbing damage and you're invulnerable, this Covenant will give you a base critical chance bonus of 5% plus an additional 1.5% for every 100 points of damage that Covenant will absorb. And once your invulnerability wears off, then the critical chance bonus gets transferred to your weapons, and then you could go on a huge killing spree with your very buffed weapon. So although a lot of people think of Covenant as an invulnerability ability, I find that this is actually a lot more weapon bonus ability that makes you significantly more powerful than you could be without this spell. Now, since this is a critical chance buff rather than a pure damage buff, you have to think a little bit differently about how you choose your weapon when you use Harrow. And of course, high critical weapons work really well with this sort of capability. And if you have a decently crit and modded weapon for crit, then with this ability, you could basically turn almost every attack into red crit damage. And this is what I feel makes this such a unique capability, even compared to the buff capabilities of other frames. This isn't a pure damage buff, but is actually a critical chance buff. And if you work it right, you can deal insane amounts of damage to your weapons. And just like with Thurible, Covenant rewards people with skill, especially in the area of headshots. So headshots gets 4 times the amount of critical chance bonus, as regular hits. Now, I'm no headshot expert. I'm not even an aiming expert. So for me, this advantage is minimal. However, even for somebody like myself or somebody with mediocre weapons, the bonus that you get does have an effect, and it can be a significant improvement in your damage capabilities while Covenant is on. Okay, so as an example, I'm going to have Harrow take on 5 level 100 heavy gunners. And here he casts Covenant, as you can see, and you can see the damage shown in the right. And the higher the damage you get, of course, the more critical chance that you get later on. So originally there is no critical chance bonus until it actually kicks in. And once it kicks in, you notice it went from yellow crits completely to red crits. And so this really shows you the significant sheer advantage of using Covenant in battle. Okay, so overall, Covenant is a wonderful ability in my perspective, and it's one of those things that I feel is unique amongst all of the frames. However, even with Covenant, Harrow is not the easiest frame to work with. You do have to really think about how to utilize this frame and how to use the abilities in tandem with each other. You have to understand that although he is invulnerable with Covenant, it only lasts for a few seconds, and once that invulnerability is up, although he has insane amounts of critical damage in his weapon, he is no longer invulnerable, and so he can get hit pretty hard, especially in higher level missions. And of course, since many of his capabilities requires a sacrifice, you do have to be careful on how you use his capabilities. So for example, even if you get Covenant and you get the insane amounts of damage, if your health is down, then you do have to cast Penance. So when do you cast Penance? Let's say you cast Penance while you're invulnerable. Does that take away the time at which you can then absorb the damage for when you're casting Covenant? And let's say you do cast Penance and you start shooting so that you could get both the insane amounts of damage and the health restore, but then you use up significant amount of energy. Then you have to cast Thurible. Well, eventually you're now spending all your time casting that you're not getting a lot of benefits during the invulnerability phase of Covenant. But Covenant's invulnerability phase does give you the option to be able to cast many of these other capabilities in tandem. And so the bottom line is you really do have to think about how to use this frame, but if you do and if you find a way, then this frame can be quite good. Now, the one other handicap that you have is, of course, when you start any mission, you don't have particularly a lot of energy to work with. So you can't constantly cast Covenant and Thurible and Penance and Condemn all at once. You have to figure out how to be able to increase your energy relatively quickly, which basically means your big ability in the beginning is Thurible. And the difficulty with that, of course, is that if you have really high level enemies, then that may become a problem. Now, the advantage, of course, is most missions don't start with really high level enemies. And so this gives you the advantage of using Thurible in the beginning parts of the mission to max out your energy and then start using all the other capabilities when it's necessary when the higher level enemies come in. Now, I'm not particularly a good player. I'm actually not a good player at all. And so in my case, I've found that casting Thurible and then just going after as many enemies, regardless of headshots, to be very important to collecting energy in the beginning. So as an example, something like the beginning of a medium level mission, let's take 20 level 50 Grineer Lancers. And since I only have like 70 energy, I can only get like 3 seconds of Thurible. So you're not going to get a significant amount of energy from each one of the enemies. But right now, instead of slowly trying to headshot everybody, right now I'm just trying to stay alive since I don't have enough energy to cast anything else, as well as kill as many enemies as quickly as possible. Not only, of course, to get as much energy as possible, but also to minimize the number of enemies shooting at me after a while. And the nice thing is durable does last for quite a bit of time, and once you gather enough energy, then you could start casting some of the other spells such as condemn, or abilities I should say. And that will help you in assisting getting more precise shots, which will of course in turn help you gain more energy. So in the beginning I started out with 70 energy. I ended up with about 200 energy, even though I didn't cast durable for a significantly long time. Now once you gather enough energy, it becomes a lot easier, and you could take on higher level enemies such as 20 level 70 heavy gunners. But you do still have to be careful, and the big important thing is how you use Covenant. And so one of the important things is when you use Covenant, you have to think opposite of what you usually do. You can't start avoiding attacks. In fact, you want to take as much damage as possible when you're in the invulnerability phase. So you actually will run into the enemy once you get into the invulnerability phase. And you have to time it well so that before you get out of your invulnerability phase, you have to get out of that group so that you don't get killed by all these people. But if you time it well, then it does work quite well, and you do get a decent amount of bonus for your weapon. Now the other important thing is when you're at this high level enemy and this number of enemy, until you can cast Covenant again, you have to be careful in avoiding damage, especially in the beginning when there's a lot of enemy out, until you can take them down later. And the important thing is each time you cast or have the chance to cast Covenant again, you want to think about what you want to do while you're invulnerable. Do you want to cast Penance so that you gain health? Do you want to cast Durable so that you want to gain energy? Or of course, do you want to cast Condemn so that you could hold the enemy down, so that you could inflict the maximum amount of damage once you come out of the invulnerability phase? So all of this starts getting in, and that's why I say Harrow is not the easiest frame. You really have to think about what you want to do while you're in battle, and if you make the wrong mistake, especially with high level enemies, you could be in a serious load of hurt until you could cast Covenant again. And so the key point is, again, to get used to using Covenant, and then using that invulnerability time to figure out what sort of advantage that you want to give to yourself. And if you do it well, then of course, as you can see here, you could clear out all 20 level 70 heavy gunners. And finally, here is my setup that I'm using at the moment. I'm not showing this because I think it's a good setup. I'm just showing this because I just wanted to show you what I used during this video. In my case, since I'm not particularly a skill player, I do put a little bit into the defense. I know a lot of people focus a lot on the offensive by increasing the power, strength, and the duration, and possibly the range. In my case, I do put in vitality and steel fiber just to increase the health and armor of the frame at a sacrifice of some of the other capabilities. And that's up to everybody else, and I know that's the case. I just wanted to show you what I have. I finally put in rage because I do take a little bit of damage, and sometimes you just don't have enough energy, even with durable. And so if you can change some of your damage to energy, then you may be able to cast that one very important Covenant spell when you are low in energy. And so in the end, I've used Harrow for a few weeks now, and I find him to be a very interesting frame. He's actually a very good frame, and he has a unique capability, especially in Covenant, that makes him very unique even amongst all the other frames that are out there. And because of that, although he isn't the most intuitive frame, and nor is he one of those frames where you could just get him and then just go out there and just kill everybody without really thinking about it by spamming the ability, you do have to think about what you are doing and how to optimize the combination of different abilities at any given time. But because of that, it actually makes him a very interesting frame to use. And if you utilize him well, then you could even go into a solo mission in the Void Survival and go for a fairly long period of time. Now, I do have to tell people that this is Annie rather than Mott. However, this did go on for close to 50 minutes. It was a little bit less than that when I finally decided to go out, but eventually I quit, not really because of getting killed or anything, but mostly because I just decided it was just getting a little bit too long. Anyway, yeah, and one final note is, of course, although Harrow is really decent even in a solo mission, he excels, I think, in team missions. And that's, again, because of the fact that Covenant is very unique. And many people may compare Harrow with Trinity and say, of course, one might be better than the other. And, of course, their abilities are slightly different in the way they're used. So people may like Trinity's Bless and Energy Vampire better than Harrow's Penance and Thurible, or the other way around. But in any case, it doesn't always have to be one or the other in terms of the frames. You could have, for example, Trinity going in there to do Energy Vampire, which I personally also like a little bit better than Thurible. But at the same time, you could then have Harrow out there to provide Covenant. And of course, Covenant is really nice because it gives the everybody a little bit of invulnerability as well as a significant amount of critical capabilities. And then, of course, if you add other frames such as Octavia, you could get some serious strength to all of your team. Now, the one other thing, of course, is you do have to think about what sort of weapons you want to use for when you use this frame, because of the fact that many of his abilities focus primarily on the capabilities of the weapons. So yeah, you don't want to just run in there with any old weapon. Critical weapons are probably going to be his strong point rather than status weapons. And so yeah, you might want to think about what you load him up with when you go into a mission. Anyway, oh yeah, one final thing. If there was one capability that I would like to see the developers think about, is Thurible. And although I do like the capabilities in general, the one thing that I do have an issue with is that his energy benefit comes only as the number of enemies killed rather than the capabilities of the enemies. In other words, you could take a level 1 Grineer or a level 200 Grineer, and whether you kill either of them, you only get the same amount of energy. And that makes it a little bit kind of lopsided, in a sense that you're sitting there thinking, well, this frame is really useful for low-level missions where a lot of enemies come out, and I don't particularly want to use them for high-level missions because, well, there's no benefit from the killing of high-level enemies. And so if developers can somehow find a way of bringing in the level of the enemy, or similar to Penance, just work with the damages that you do to an enemy rather than the kill of the enemy, then that may turn out to be a little bit easier, or at least more favorable for me to use Thurible. But anyway, that's basically what I have with regards to Harrow. And sorry for the long-winded review, and thank you very much for watching the video. If you have any comments, please post them in the comment section below, and I would like to hear about your experiences with Harrow as well. We'll be continuing to make more Warframe videos in the future, and when we do, I hope you join us. So until the next Warframe video, we wish you all the best, happy hunting, and as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.